Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today, we've got some intense stories from the Am I the Asshole subreddit. Please feel free to comment down below and share your thoughts. So, without further ado, let's jump into our first story. My husband gave me a warning tap and I called it abuse. Am I the asshole here? As I'm writing this, I'm lying in bed with my mom, who's helping me gather my thoughts and seek some outside opinions. I'm 24, my husband is 30, and we've been together for 3 years, married for 1. A week ago, we got into an argument over his phone, which he had misplaced. I was in the shower when he lost it, and when I came out, he was absolutely furious, yelling and snapping at me, asking if I'd seen it or moved it. I hadn't touched it and told him as much, but I needed to get dressed. However, my husband was standing in the doorway, blocking it, so I couldn't even open it. I asked him to move, and apparently, my tone must have come off as rude because he turned around and shoved me back into the room. I told him he needed to calm down and that I could help him look for the phone after I got dressed. Instead of calming down, he told me to hurry up. I snapped back, saying, "I'm not gonna hurry up, it isn't my fault." That's when it happened. My husband turned around and hit me on the mouth with the back of his hand. It didn't really hurt, but I was completely shocked. He called it a warning tap because of what he said was my bad attitude. I didn't even respond. I just left. I called my mom, and I've been at her place ever since. The next day, my brother took me back to grab some of my things. When my husband saw me, he asked if all this was really necessary, and I told him it absolutely was, especially when he chooses to abuse his wife. He was stunned that I called it abuse and started yelling at me for using that word. He said I could ruin his career if I went around saying that. I know I could, and I know he didn't even hurt me that badly, but that's how it feels. He's since sent me several texts threatening to divorce me if I ever use that word again or if I tell someone important. So, am I the asshole for calling it abuse, potentially ruining his career, and standing my ground? Moving on to our second story. Am I the asshole for not tipping after overhearing what my waitress said about me? I, 30F, went to a restaurant last night with my mom for what was supposed to be a lovely evening. My mom was meeting my boyfriend's mom for the first time, so we wanted everything to go smoothly. We're punctual people, so naturally, we arrived about 30 minutes before our reservation time. The restaurant wasn't too busy, so we got seated without any issues. However, things started to go downhill pretty quickly after that. It took about 20 minutes for our waitress to come to our table, which seemed odd considering the restaurant was pretty empty. The moment she approached us, I could sense that something was off. She didn't greet us with a hello or any sort of pleasantries. Instead, she just asked what we wanted to drink in the most disinterested tone. My mom and I gave her our drink orders, and I noticed she didn't bother to write anything down. That was the first red flag. Another 15 minutes went by before our drinks finally arrived, and guess what? They were wrong. Now, it's hard to mess up a ginger ale and a vodka soda, but she managed to do just that. My mom pointed out that she hadn't ordered a Pepsi, and instead of apologizing, the waitress rolled her eyes, grabbed the glass, and walked away without a word. At this point, I was feeling pretty irritated, but I kept my cool. Shortly after, I excused myself to use the restroom. Since I wasn't sure where it was, I headed toward the entrance to ask one of the hostesses for directions. As I approached the server area, I couldn't help but overhear my waitress talking to some of the other hostesses. She was clearly upset and complained about having to serve a black table because they never tip well. My mom and I were the only black people in the restaurant, so it didn't take a genius to figure out she was talking about us. And the worst part? She wasn't even trying to keep her voice down. I was angry, but I didn't let it show. I interrupted their conversation and asked for the bathroom's location as if I hadn't heard a thing. When I returned to the table, my boyfriend and his mom had already arrived. My boyfriend and his mother are both white. The moment our waitress saw them, her attitude did a complete 180. Suddenly, she was all smiles, taking detailed notes of our orders, cracking jokes, and making sure our water glasses were never empty. It was like night and day compared to how she treated us before. The dinner ended up going well, so I decided to treat everyone and pay the bill. When the waitress handed me the payment machine, I smiled and keyed in 0% for the tip. She didn't notice until after the receipt was printed, and by that time, we were already getting up to leave. She quickly tapped me on the shoulder, asking if I had made a mistake on the bill. I looked her straight in the eye and told her I didn't think so. She pressed further, asking if there was something wrong with her service, and I replied that her service was indeed fantastic, but since I'm a black woman, I apparently don't tip well. Her face turned ghostly white, and she let out a nervous laugh. I just smiled and walked out with the others. On our way out, my boyfriend's mom asked what had happened, and I explained everything. She was not impressed with my actions and told me that I should have tipped her anyway because it shows character. She seemed pretty upset with me after that. My boyfriend and my mom are both on my side, but now I'm wondering if I should have just thrown in a $2 tip to avoid the drama.
Our next story is, am I the asshole here for telling my parents they could be a part of my kids' lives if they gave me my inheritance? My grandparents passed away when I was very young, leaving me an inheritance that was supposed to pave the way for my education and help me get a solid start in life. Their intention was clear. They wanted me to be set up for success. But if my parents had left it alone, I'd be in a much better place now. My cousins and older sister are all debt-free and own their own homes, living comfortably. I, however, received $27,000 when I was finally old enough to access my inheritance, about 10% of what everyone else got. To make matters worse, my parents managed to lose a significant portion of the money that had been set aside for my mom. I've cut my parents out of my life completely. They weren't invited to my wedding, and they haven't met my kids. My sister, who has chosen to remain child-free, is not in a similar situation. As a result, my parents are eager to be involved in my children's lives. I told them that if they replaced my money, plus interest, I would be willing to forgive them and let them meet my kids. Their response was that my request is unreasonable and would significantly impact their retirement fund. I pointed out that this situation wouldn't have happened if my father hadn't been so arrogant, thinking he could outperform my grandfather's investments. My sister thinks I'm being harsh. I told her she was welcome to contribute her own money if she didn't believe it was a big deal. She refused, and when I suggested she might consider having children if she wanted to give them grandchildren, she dismissed the idea. Years have passed, and I'm still seething over how my father's ego robbed me of my future. He wanted to prove he could outdo my grandfather's financial wisdom, but all he succeeded in doing was setting me back. So, am I the asshole here?
Moving on to the next story. Girlfriend pointed an unloaded gun in my face. We were visiting a good friend of mine when he moved out of state. He brought me to his bedroom closet to show me an AR-15 and handgun he purchased after moving. I handled both guns after checking they were unloaded and I knew they were safe. My girlfriend walks into the room and he hands the AR-15 to her. She does not check it to affirm it is indeed clear, and the first thing she does is point it directly in my face. I slapped the barrel down and said, "What the fuck are you doing?" in an aggressive tone. She then handed my friend his rifle back and stormed out of the room. She didn't like the fact I aggressively chastised her for ignoring basic gun safety. She told me, "You didn't have to talk to me like I'm stupid," and didn't understand my point wasn't to make her feel stupid but that action is dangerous, especially since she was not in the room to witness it being checked for live ammunition, and she did not check the gun herself. Am I wrong for aggressively chastising her? Or should I have been nicer?